Welcome to the Mothers of All Crime. This is a podcast where we deep dive into mothers involved in infamous crimes and scandals. Hey, Crystal, how are you?
Hi, Monica. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Here on sort of a holiday. Just kind of
Oh,
getting ready.
it's a holiday to us. It's New Year's Eve.
It's New Year's Eve. I don't know when you're listening to this, but right now it's New Year's Eve. So
Soon it'll
it's
be
gonna.
2024, which is when this will come out. And now you get to start off how long we've been doing it, depending on when you listen.
Yeah, that's true. This is like calling us out a bit.
All
But I
right.
think
So
2024 is
let's,
going to be a good year for true crime, so I'm
I
into it.
hope so. We have a lot of things coming out. We have a lot of things in the works. Returning of a couple people. So we haven't recorded some of our favorites yet because there's a lot of new information coming out.
Yeah.
So definitely come back and listen to those ones.
Some oldies but goodies. But
Yes.
today we're going to talk about your new favorite person, Marissa Tietsort.
Oh yes, I have so many questions and so many opinions.
I don't know like what I'm going to be able to answer because there's a lot of like shit that does not make sense, but we can definitely get into it. Do we want to start talking about what happened that day or do we want to talk about
Yeah,
Marissa
let's.
before?
I think we should probably start with the day, the incident, and what happened, and then go into her history
Okay.
because it all kind of connects and explains, I think, the escalation once you find out what happened prior.
Okay. So we're going to set the scene a little bit.
Yes, let's do
Um
it.
do you want to start with where the documentary starts?
October
Because we
18th,
use
2018.
October 18th, 2018. There's a 911 call from a laundromat where a mother named Heather Gardner and her sister have just picked up her infant, Benson, who's 2 months old, and her 3-year-old son, Jathan, from their babysitter's house. And now they're at the laundromat and they've realized that Benson, the 2-month old who's in a car seat, is not breathing. So they call 911. There's a big dramatic phone call and CPR attempts, but they are ultimately unsuccessful, and Benson is pronounced dead.
Yeah, and
So,
when the police show up, the mother and her sister performing CPR, like you said, by instruction of the 911 operator.
mhm.
Neither of these women already knew any type of CPR, which I thought was kind of interesting. The operator is talking her through the steps of what she needs to do. When the police show up, they
Yeah.
take over, but it had been pretty much determined that this baby had passed prior to the police showing up, which is so sad.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's really sad. They clearly had no idea what to do. And you can hear the older child, Jathan, you can hear him screaming and sobbing, and he's just freaking out. So they're trying to perform CPR on a baby, which they don't know how to do. And they're trying to keep a 3-year-old calm. And they're in a public place, and they don't even know the address of where they're at. Like, you can just hear the panic in their voices. It's a
And
terrible
I believe
situation,
it was
obviously.
super, super late. Wasn't it like 10 p.m. or something
It
crazy?
was. It was late. Let me see if I can get the actual time because I had that on
Because
one
I
of
have
my.
2100, but I'm not sure if that's when the police arrived or if that's when they started being questioned. But again, I'm not a parent, but having your 2 month old and 3 year old up at 11 p.m. in a public place, like,
So they
seems a
picked him
little.
up at 9:20 p.m. and then like I guess so it happened the 911 call happened in between 9:20 and 9:50 p.m.
Okay.
It is a
I
lot.
still,
It is a lot.
it's very late for very young children to be out. Normally, you pick up your kid from the babysitter, you go home, and you put them to bed from
Yeah.
most experiences. But I mean, I get it. You have something to do. You got to do it. It's just you, and it kind of seems that she had errands that she needed to run. And when the police showed up and they started questioning the mother and the sister Jessie had a really interesting demeanor. Both of them in the videos from the body cam were extremely calm, in my opinion, to have just
Mm.
found a dead baby and your dead baby in a car seat who had been with you for a little bit. It's not like 10 minutes had gone by. They'd been with them for a little bit. So the two of them, in my opinion, seemed really calm for the situation talking to these police officers. And Jesse's first instinct was the babysitter did it.
Yes. She actually texted her and said, "You killed my sister's fucking baby," at 9:50
Mm-hmm.
p.m. So they picked up the kid at 9:20 p.m. and then by 9:50 p.m. she texted her saying, "You killed my sister's fucking baby." And I think it's worth pointing out that this is not just like a random babysitter that she hired, but a friend. She goes on in later interviews to call her a friend of a friend, but it seems like in the beginning she was just her friend. So I think that this is a person that she knows and trusted to a degree.
And
Um,
had watched them more than once. This wasn't
yeah.
the first time that the baby had ever been left with her.
In fact, Marissa had a unlicensed daycare in her home, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like her full time gig was babysitting,
Mm-hmm.
which should not have been her job.
Oh my
Clearly,
God.
clearly. And I think it brings a really interesting um, point where, and I saw this several times, that so Marissa is a mother herself. We find out through the documentary that she has 6 children, and she has 5 children, and she's currently pregnant with her 6th child. And so she has a little baby in the home. She's pregnant. And I saw in multiple interviews with Heather, the mother of Benson, that she trusted Marissa because she's a mother too, and she has a little baby, so it must be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's her whole credential.
Right.
Right.
And on the night of the incident, I think it's also important to note that not all these children are in Marissa's care.
Mm.
Only the night of the incident was m- most her youngest baby and Heather's 2 children
Right.
that were
Well,
in the home with her.
there's a good reason for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, her 4 older children had been permanently removed by CPS.
Yeah, and I guess we could talk about a little bit of like her personal history. I think it might be relevant for that before we start talking about Marissa's interaction with the police. But
Mm,
Marissa had a history of drug use.
she
Um,
did.
her boyfriend at the time, and the father of all of her children,
Adam.
um, yep, Adam, does claim that Marissa was sober for the last 4 years. Um, however, I hope that is the truth because addiction is awful, but it, from her demeanors and her behaviors, I really question how accurate that is. It doesn't really say what her drug of choice was, but you gotta
Yeah, it doesn't.
wonder
I couldn't
by
find that
her.
anywhere. She was
Couldn't
charged
either.
with drug paraphernalia and drug possession, but it doesn't say
Which is
what
such a
kind.
broad
Yeah,
charge.
yeah,
It could range from very minuscule things to very extreme things. And 4 years, they mentioned she had to go to a rehab and like get treatment. So it definitely wasn't a casual thing that she was doing.
right.
And and also, if you have 4 children taken from your home, again, nobody wants to take their children from their parents, and they do it in the well being of the children. And if you have a parent who is putting these children in harm's way, particularly selecting drugs over their children, which unfortunately happens a lot, you're going to take those children, which is possibly one of the reasons that connects to why she was considered unfit.
Definitely unfit. And it's funny when you were talking about, not funny, but when you were talking about how Heather didn't know how to do CPR. I think I had a moment of judging her for not being a good enough mom and knowing baby CPR because, like,
Mm-hmm.
in my world, that's something that everyone should do. But I think that maybe I'm looking through it with a very privileged lens, very like
Mm-hmm.
educated, financially privileged end where like it's a no-brainer that you need to learn how to do infant CPR if you have a small child. But I think that that's not realistic for everyone. And for Marissa, like she had 4 children taken away, but there's nothing stopping her from having many, many more. So
Mm-hmm. As we
she,
see, she's
right. So
her
she's
fifth
still,
baby and currently pregnant.
she can still present herself as a mother, and we
Mm-hmm.
have these certain expectations of what a mother knows and what a mother does and how a mother acts, and mothers are just people and they're just fucked up like the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's something that out from an outside perspective, you go, well, why don't you know that? You should know that. You have a
Right.
baby. But the other part of it is she has a cell phone. It's 2018. Even if you don't have the privilege of being able to go to a class or something like that, you can look up, have a general conceptual understanding of what it is. But then again, you are correct where in those circumstances, you might understand how to do it, but when push comes to shove in an emergency situation, you're not necessarily going to respond that way because it's your child, the child in your care, it's panic, it's fear. Like, not everybody
Yeah.
in those circumstances are going to respond in a proper manner.
And I thought that Heather and Jesse did seem genuinely panicked and distraught on the call, but you're right. By
Hmm.
the time the cops got there, they had really, I guess, calmed down. But also, we got to remember that they have a 3-year-old with them. And so they're
Hmm.
trying to probably not fall apart completely in front of him because he would be further traumatized by that and scared.
Yeah.
So maybe they were just trying to relay the information without, I don't know, making it
And it's
worse.
possible. I'm just thinking of like the when I way back when I took care of little kids growing up
Hmm.
and
Me
high
too.
school
Yeah.
and college, and I can only imagine as a parent, again, not one, but I would not have been able to control that, regardless if I had a 3-year-old with me or not, of I'm holding my dead baby in my hands.
Ugh.
Like, there's not an ounce in me that would have been able to sit there, have a very calm, collected, articulate conversation with an officer about my day prior to that. It just wouldn't happen. Like, I'm at a loss of words listening to this conversation.
I know. I mean, for sure. Although I do think, everyone reacts differently,
Oh,
which,
yeah.
and people come into things with their traumas that already happened and their previous experiences, and we don't really
Mhm.
know what Heather's life was like prior to that day.
Right.
I have stalked her on social media today and yesterday, and she definitely posted a lot about the trial and justice for Benson and all of these things. I
Oh,
think that
yeah.
she, I don't know what was happening that day, but I also think there are some details that are kind of left out of the
Hmm.
documentary about that day also.
Okay, so let's keep going with that particular day, and we'll come back to some historical stuff.
Okay.
After the police left their conversation with Heather and her sister, they
Mhm.
went over to Marissa. They went to her apartment and they found the apartment where she had watched all the children. Nobody was inside.
Right.
And now it became a, well, where did she go? Where's her husband, their baby? Where did everybody go? Called the phone company, had her phone tracked to a local hotel in town, and they went there next.
Yes, they did. And then we see text messages that basically are Marissa saying that she wants to check into a hotel because she wants to go swimming and she wants to use the hot tub in
Mhm.
like a little shitty hotel, which at 10 o'clock at night, You're gonna go swimming with a baby when you're, I don't
Right.
know. It just,
Hmm.
I mean, one of many things that just doesn't make sense. And
Right.
Adam is with her, and their child is with her. But yeah, and she tries to say that she doesn't have her phone on her, and the cops tell her that of course you do because that's how we found you. So she acts like
Yeah.
she had no idea that anything had happened. She acts, well, she doesn't do a great job, but she tries to act like she's very surprised when she's told that Benson is dead. Um, and the cops tell her, we know that you already know because Heather's sister texted you saying you killed my sister's fucking baby. And that's when she's like, oh, my phone's not here. My phone's not on. Yes, it is.
Yeah. From what I remember, she said that her phone's not on. And from a tracking perspective, if your phone is off, it makes things a lot harder to locate where a phone is. And basically,
Yeah.
what they would do is they would locate it from the most recent time it was used. So, in theory, at that particular time of the conversation, it could be true where they went to the hotel, her phone died, and she hadn't turned it back on and hadn't seen the text. We later find out that's not true, but in that exact moment, that is
It is
unrealistic,
possible.
but it
Yeah, it's
is
possible.
possible.
Right.
So you have that moment of, okay, well, yes, the cop is right saying it has to be on because we found you, but that's also a little bit of a technique where you're trying to show her they have more information they're leading on. Because if that was the last place she would be using her phone, that's where it's going to ping on the search.
That's true. I think her phone was probably just on the whole time.
Oh, absolutely agree with you. She definitely read the text, but
Yeah.
you never know.
There's
It's the
points of
one thing
this,
that was never confirmed.
there's points of it where I like feel like almost a sympathy for Marissa, which I really struggle with a little bit.
At the beginning, I did the same thing. Mm-hmm. Did the same thing.
Yeah, because she's clearly not a genius. Like she has definitely some, she seems like she has some maybe processing delays, a little bit low functioning. She's not very eloquent. She's not good at
Mm-hmm.
explaining situations. So on those levels, I kind of feel bad for her. And reading more about her backgrounds, I felt bad for her. But then I also read the autopsy. I
Right.
didn't feel bad for her.
Yeah.
So
And
let's.
if you have that kind of, the police knew her history, which we'll get into in a
Mm-hmm.
second, but which kind of led them to directly assume that she was at fault. Which, and if you go into this not knowing anything, watching the documentary, you instantly kind of have that moment of, well, why isn't the mother being looked at all? Because they
Mm,
basically have a conversation with the mother, the aunt, and go, okay, great. Was the babysitter? Off we go. And if you don't, like, I went into this, that was the first thing I had looked at. My first reaction is, that's great. Absolutely should go talk to her. But why is nobody even considering the baby was found dead in the care of the mother?
mm.
You're just going to take her word for it? Which makes sense looking once you start learning about Marissa's history. But in that moment, it's an interesting take where instantly left. You're right. It was her.
Yeah, and I do think that Heather was automatically believed
Mm-hmm.
because mothers don't kill their babies.
Right.
But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in this case, that's true. She didn't.
True.
But
Which I'm
it
very
does,
glad that
I
is
do
the
think
circumstance.
it is interesting though, because if anyone other than Benson's mother was with him when that 911 call happened, even his father, I think that it would have
Mm-hmm.
been looked at really differently.
Right. It would have
And
changed the circumstance.
would have possibly been detained at the police station while they were waiting for these other details to shake out. Not that they would have necessarily like arrested them or anything. It's not like
It would
I
have
don't know
been
that
more of an interest into the other players if it wasn't for Marissa's history and
yeah,
recent history, might I
very recent history. That's really what it all boils down to.
add. Mm-hmm.
And maybe Heather made some bad judgment calls, which we can get into, but I think that it's and we could also talk about Adam's possible involvement.
Mm. Well, so once the police found Marissa in the hotel, They
Mm-hmm.
started having a conversation with her, and basically, you're like you mentioned, pushing of, we know you know what happened, and
Right.
trying to get her to have some kind of conversation about what happened at the house, what happened throughout the day, getting details on how we went from a healthy baby in your care to, unfortunately, a corpse in a car seat.
Well, she flat out denies knowing anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
She has no clue what they're talking about. She has no idea. She was like, "Oh my gosh, how did he die?" And she does very weird facial expressions, which to me are like the most memorable thing about, well, maybe the second of the documentary that's on YouTube about her. She's like smiling through all of her denials.
Mm-hmm.
Has these weird, like, not crying, but like looks like she's trying to cry, but she's smiling and she's saying, I have no idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So her first walkthrough of the day was that the children got dropped off. They played outside for a bit. She came inside, put him in the pack and play, had a baby monitor. He'd slept some, didn't make a sound. She then took him out, put him in his car seat. They went to McDonald's, brought him home. Mom picked him up, totally fine. That was the original story. And then the police started to push.
Yeah. Well, I have a real timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was her story. And he was totally fine when she gave the baby to Heather. But in the real world, the timeline was basically that he was dropped off with his brother at like 3:30 p.m. And then at about, I'm trying to find the actual time. I think about 5:30 p.m., Marissa texted Heather and said, I have been charged with child abuse and I'm not supposed to be babysitting. So please don't tell anyone that I'm watching your sons. And then about 3 hours later is when Heather picked him up.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if we want to talk about like questionable stuff on Heather's
And
end, to me, that's it.
that's where it starts for me is
Mm-hmm.
if you get a text message, I don't care what you are doing, that your babysitter texts you, I am being actively charged for child abuse. Don't tell anyone I have your kids. I would be in the car, and I think any sane parent should be in the car at that house going, great, give me my kids. Like,
Yeah. The
and
text was
this,
5:57 p.m. and he was picked up at 9:20 p.m.,
mhm.
which is a
And this
lot
is
of
also a
time.
small town. This is a town where everyone kind of knows each other. It's a small town, rumors row. I grew up in a town where that it was bigger than this one, but you start to hear things. And this child abuse allegation and charge happened, what was it, about 2 months earlier as the process was going through?
So there was a incident on August 2nd, 2018, but she was not formally charged until October 11th, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
That day, October 18th, 2018, that Benson passed away. That's when
Right.
there were articles coming out because her name had been released because she'd been officially charged.
Right.
So it was
But
literally that
if
day
you have
that this was public.
CPS being involved in your life, that's not something that people don't know.
Yeah,
That is
that's
not
true.
something having your four children removed from your home that people don't notice. They're not aware. So, and that's where I start having questions with Heather of you're putting your two children in the care of someone who you actively know has lost their right to have their children, have had previous allegations of issues. It is then confirmed she's in another situation where she's having abuse allegations and charges, and you still are leaving your children with her.
Well, just for a moment to defend Heather. when you're in a financial position that if you leave work early, it's going to
Mm-hmm.
like have detrimental
Oh,
effects,
absolutely.
then it's harder to do so. And I don't know what she was doing for work, and I don't know how quickly she could have left and how long it would have taken, but I do think it's pretty much inexcusable to
Oh,
leave
yeah.
her. I don't know if Heather knew
It's more
about the four
find
other
another
kids though.
babysitter. Yeah, find another
Ugh.
babysitter. That's my whole thought. Like,
I mean, hey, why don't we provide childcare for people, and have safe options be affordable for everyone? Because it is exorbitantly expensive to send your kids to like a real daycare. So she probably thought she was getting a
mhm,
hell of a bargain with Marissa. I
right.
don't know what she was charging, but it probably wasn't a lot. And I'm sure
Oh,
she was
everything
presenting
I hear
herself.
is awful when it comes to prices of childcare. It's
It's
insane.
ridiculously expensive. And if you're making minimum wage, you're going to spend more on daycare than you are going to actually get paid.
Right.
So I think that financial situations can push you into acting against what would otherwise be your better judgment.
Hmm. And I think that plays a huge thing here because you can kind of tell by their demeanors they're a little less educated and they're in a very small town where the opportunities are not going to be necessarily there compared to other areas. And you kind of do what you have to do.
Yeah.
And it's really sad and it's really unfortunate. It just is, for me, it's hard to look at it where there's other opportunities. I don't care how small of a town you're in, where you're making the active choice to put your child in danger. And that's where I start to have a hard time
Yeah.
from a
At
she's
least at least for those like 3 hours, she 100% knew
oh
that
yeah.
there was a problem with Marissa. You could maybe say that she wasn't aware. Maybe she should have been aware, but maybe she was not aware of the other
Hmm.
problems that had happened before. I know that if my four children were taken into CPS care and I had lost all access to them, it probably would not be the first thing I would tell someone. Especially if I was trying to make money watching their children, I probably would
Hmm.
leave that part out.
Right. Yeah, for
I would
sure.
be like, oh, well, look at my baby that I definitely have custody of, and my pregnant
My
belly that I
current
definitely have.
child.
Right. Look at my baby. And it's like, you could present yourself as a mom, and it's like, you don't know,
Oh, sure.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't know what happened with those other kids. But I mean, we know now, and with the benefit of all this information, it feels so obvious.
Hmm.
Do you want to talk about the the prior abuse charge that she'd been, or do you
Sure.
want to go
Yeah.
more into what the police?
I think the prior one is important before we do her. We'll just say this. The police talked to her in the hotel. She was
Hmm.
arrested, brought into the
Hmm.
station.
Hmm.
But before we talk about her official interrogation, I think it's good to know about what happened on 20 in October prior
Okay.
in August, excuse me,
In August, yeah, but she
in
was charged in
August.
October, so both
Yeah,
really.
because I think that's going
So
to give context.
in August 2nd, 2018, Marissa was babysitting an 11-month-old girl named Riley, and she sent the parents a Facebook message while she was watching her saying that she had fallen off the couch, um, and hurt her face, but that she was totally fine. And when the parents picked her up, they described her injuries as it looked like she'd been dragged across the ground on her face. Like I looked up pictures, and this poor baby, her face is completely covered in red marks and bruises. Her
Mm.
scalp was cut up. I mean, they said she was traumatized and terrified, and it was really hard to wash her hair or wash her face afterward because she was in pain and she was scared. So it caused a lot of distress, and she was really hurt. She was only 11 months old. Um,
Poor thing.
yeah, and her father insisted on pressing charges, which is why charges were ultimately pressed, because there was also a prior incident in 2017 that Marissa was not charged for, which I don't know if you came across that,
Hmm.
but in 2017 She was watching it was a very similar situation to Benson. She was watching a 3 month old and his three-year old sister, and he ended up with a face full of bruises and a fractured skull. And Marissa was questioned about it, and she said that his 3-year old sister had dropped a baby bottle on him, and that's how he sustained his head injuries. So she was not charged for that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And this is again after her 4 kids had already been taken away from her, and after previous child abuse charges, including leaving a child in a hot car intentionally. So she's, I mean, babysitter of the year for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the cops having this information, because like you said, it's a small area, and the cops clearly all know her.
Mm-hmm.
They know about these prior incidents. And I'm sure if you knew that a 3 month old had had a fractured skull at her apartment, and then a year later, there's a 2 month old who's dead, I mean, it doesn't look good.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when it comes to cases like this, it's not something that just disappears. Like, very rarely when you have multiple allegations are they not true, which is sad because sometimes you have one thing that's a misunderstanding. Kids fall, kids get hurt, or you have a disgruntled parent, or whatever it may be. If you have one allegation that something went wrong in your care, pretending she had all custody of all her children, there is a circumstance that maybe something had happened. But when you have consistent stories that are not super different, every one of them is a pattern. That's when you start to go, okay, this person's probably not safe around children.
The level of detachment that she had while talking about what happened, I mean, it is bone chilling. I feel like she would have gone on to be a serial killer. Like, this clearly is a pattern of behavior. And this is not something where, because I feel like at first they were trying to see if maybe he had been left in a position where he could have suffocated.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of what the implications were going until they got the autopsy. And the autopsy showed multiple head injuries and tailbone injuries consistent with beating. So
For
she beat,
Benson.
yeah, for Benson. So she beat a 2 month old to death. Like, that's not something that's an accident. And it fits so nicely with her pattern of behavior before. I just don't know how this person was allowed to walk the streets. Like, it seems like she should have already been in jail for so much of this stuff. And she was
Yeah.
just out here babysitting. It's terrifying.
Well, one thing that I think is important to mention is CPS. So clearly, CPS is involved in this woman's life, has been involved for many years. And unfortunately, the system that is currently set up, there are not enough employees to manage the families and the children that are in their care, which is where you have a lot of circumstances that things get brushed under the rug, things don't get dealt with in a timely manner. In the August situation, they didn't even know she had another child.
Which I don't
And
understand how that's possible.
well, it's from an outside perspective, totally agree with you because they're supposed to, on paper, be making checks with her. But also, if she had lost 100% custody, was never had any chance of getting her other children back, you get put on the bottom of the list. You're no longer my priority care.
That's a good point.
Because most caseworkers are dealing with a really high number of caseload. I ended up looking it up, and the average CPS worker deals with 64 cases at a time. And their caseload ranges from 20 kids to 30 kids, but you're supposed to deal with each one weekly. There's not enough hours in the day to deal with each individual family an hour a day, it's just not possible. There's not enough people, and there's not enough funding to hire more people. So it's kind of that broken system of she's a perfect example of things falling through the cracks because there's not enough people.
Uh, Definitely fell through the cracks, but I mean, it's a good point, and I think that maybe when she was down to having zero children, because there was a point where her four children had been removed from her custody and she lost all access to them and she was
Mm-hmm.
never going to get it back, that she had no kids at all.
Yeah,
And
and you're
so,
on the you're bottomed and going. I have kids in active violent household. I need to focus on.
right, as
We'll
opposed to
come
someone who
back to you.
has no children in their home. And it's
Mhm.
not like CPS is the pregnancy police where they're
Right.
supposed to be. And I don't know about the prenatal care that she received. I'm not sure if her doctors were aware, but it is CPS is not perfect, and there's a lot of privacy issues that come up too because pregnancy care is your medical care. So like the state's
Mm.
not just they're not just invited into that unless there are pending charges, but if all of her children had been removed, then there were no pending charges. So she was
Yeah.
just
When
out
it
here having a
comes to
baby.
prenatal care, is that something that ever gets asked when it comes to other children? Like, hey, have you ever had other children? Are they
Yeah.
still in your care?
So not are they still in your care? And we do start pretty much by asking everyone what number of pregnancy is this for you and what were
Right.
the outcomes of the previous pregnancy. But when we're talking about that, we're talking about is that child alive? We're not talking about,
Mm,
and sometimes you'll say like, oh, do you have, oh, so it's like, oh, you're gravida 6, para 4. So do you have 4 children at home? And sometimes you'll phrase it that way. But I've had patients who their children had been um, like either they'd lost them in custody battles with the other parent, the grandparent had custody of them, they're in the
mhm.
care of the state, stuff like that. And they'll just say, yeah, I have living children.
Interesting.
They're not going to offer up that I don't have custody of them and I don't know anything about them.
Right.
That's very rare when that happens.
Interesting. Okay.
I think there's, shame associated with it.
Oh, of course. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think it is unfortunate, but the CPS, they mean well, but sometimes it's just there's not enough and overworked and things fall through. So I think that's kind of how coming to light, she probably may have had other incidents with other children that just didn't get reported between that time period because they were quote
definitely.
unquote minor issues where a parent could
Well,
believe, all right, maybe my kid did fall, or oh, well, I don't know what happened, or, and it just never got reported.
I do think that it may have been intentional on Marissa's part that um, to watch children who weren't old enough to talk or who were not
Mm-hmm.
old enough to testify or be
Yeah.
believed. A 3 year
Mm-hmm.
old's not a great witness. 11-month old, a 2 month old, like they can't defend themselves physically or verbally. They're just completely at your mercy. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
she was. It's hard to say because it's like if she was the parent of Benson and she said something like, I just went into a rage and I hadn't slept in 3 months and this child was screaming nonstop. And I mean, I would still think that this is obviously a horrific way to handle it, but you're only watching him for a couple of hours. Like,
Right.
how badly behaved could a 2 month old be that this is, which makes me think that it's not about that,
Mm-hmm.
that it's not about his behavior or being overwhelmed, that she wanted to do this and kept putting herself in positions to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I
So
mean, yeah.
yeah, so during the August situation, the CPS was there, the police were there, they were questioning her, and her boyfriend Adam was there as well.
Hmm.
And Adam was upset. He was distraught. He was verbally a little bit aggressive. Um, However, very normal. Having a reaction like that, as inappropriate as it may appear, is very normal.
Yeah.
While Marissa is standing there, calm, cool, collected. All right, yeah, they're gonna take the baby. Okay. Or I have to leave. Whatever, doesn't matter. Like it was very calm and disassociated. One could argue it was because she was trying to get Adam to cool down so that the baby would, because the baby was clearly upset. She's crying, or like, one could argue Marissa's doing it to get him to calm down so the situation de escalates. But the more you see her in other circumstances, is it appears she just doesn't care. Okay, go ahead. Not a big deal. And Adam's the one upset.
Adam is losing it.
Mm-hmm.
And he is the father of all of her children. So he has also lost all of his children. And now he's seeing his girlfriend in another situation where she is likely going to go to jail. He's finding out that a baby died in his home. And I don't even know if we mentioned the most interesting part, that they took this child's corpse to McDonald's.
Oh, yes, Benson.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they took him to McDonald's. And Adam, this is when I thought Adam was possibly involved, because he's saying that he picked him up and put him in his car seat and he was acting totally normal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know the level of Adam's involvement, but I think that he maybe was just really stupid.
I actually think he was mixing up the babies
Mm.
because their baby together was also an infant in a car seat going with them. And I he's definitely not the brightest bulb on the tree. And I think he actually was probably mixing up and not knowing the cry of his baby versus the cry of this other baby. I think his brain went, I picked up a baby, got them dressed, put them in a car seat, and they cried. Like,
Yeah.
that's because they had the same kind of car seat. They had from a visual, like, if you're not someone who's particularly involved in your infant's life, you might not know the sound differences. You might not know the demeanor. And when you have this horrific conversation of, hey, your long term girlfriend and the mother of your children is being arrested for killing a baby,
Ugh.
you're going to start to kind of both internally have a conversation with yourself while trying to have an officer police conversation, while trying to deal with your emotions. Like, there's a lot going on internally for him. My theory is he mixed up the children and went, because the minute that they were like, well, she said she did this, and he was like, I guess, yeah, that could be true. Like, it was just that, I mean, okay. Like,
Yeah, because Marissa's story is that Benson was dead when they went to McDonald's, and Adam's story is that he was alive when they went to McDonald's. So if Adam's story is true, then he's implicating himself, and he's saying that he was home when this child died.
mm-hmm.
But otherwise, the only adult there was Marissa. So it's not in his best interest to say that, but I also don't know if he's thinking that far along. I
You're
actually,
not
I
wrong.
don't really think he's involved, but I think that it's just so bizarre that, and
Yeah.
the whole time he is also saying like she was abused as a child, so she would never hurt kids. She loves kids. She's such a good mom. And it's
Actually, if
like,
you noticed, he only focused on she loves kids.
mm,
She's a mom herself. She loves kids and her personal abuse. But he never defended her. He never said she would never have killed him.
mm,
He actually said, um, every time I'm not around, shit like this happens. And I
wow.
told her I didn't want her watching kids anymore. He actually, as the conversation went, more or less confirmed her capability of something like this. He stood by that she loved kids, but he also made it very clear that he doesn't doubt her possibility that she did this.
What is Adam's problem? I don't understand why he is still. like why he was involved with her for so long. I don't know what he had done to the children over the years, but I mean, there were multiple instances where Adam was accusing her of child abuse of their kids,
Mm-hmm.
and he is still having more babies with her and leaving her at home alone to babysit other people's kids, and he's not
Yeah.
warning these other people. Like, I am actually really surprised that he was not charged.
Yeah. And well, here's the thing is just because you're aware of something as a civilian, you don't have any obligation to do anything. And
I guess that's true.
it's unfortunate, but also circling back to the drug use, you can make an assumption that he also is an addict or previously was an addict,
Probably,
where
yeah.
they have that codependency. And if you consistently have that, you can recognize something is bad and not do anything about it. And also that if you're living in a lower income area, you might not have the education or the financial means to properly protect yourself from continuously having children too.
Just more arguments for universal health care and universal daycare. Feels like it would have
Hmm.
solved these problems. Although I
Yeah.
do think that they were having these kids on purpose, so I don't know how much that would have helped actually.
Yeah.
But I think
It,
that
it goes either way for sure.
I think Marissa really identified with being a mother, which is very
Wild.
sad. Yeah.
All right. So she got brought into custody. Adam did not.
Hmm.
Um, and next we have her sitting across the table between two officers, one male, one female, having a new conversation about Benson and what happened. This was the
Hmm.
day after the autopsy had been conducted. So the officers had the information on what the traumas were, what the cause of death were, injuries that had been sustained, and they're now trying to have Marissa tell them exactly what happened.
And she is like beating around the bush quite a bit.
Hmm.
She doesn't want to admit to anything.
Yeah, and I got to give the officers credit where they did a fantastic job of having a conversation with her. It is a very tough crime to be talking about.
Hmm.
And one thing you want to do when you're in these circumstances is build a rapport with the individual. Because if you come in guns blazing, they're going to shut down and you're not going to have any conversation with them. So if you noticed, what they did was, you are a good mother. We want to help you people see that you're a good person and you didn't do anything on purpose. Tell us what happened and help Heather understand. So it's her making a good decision to help other people because she's a mom and she wants to help people. And
They did keep saying that specifically, that Heather
mhm.
deserves to know what happened.
And you as a mom, you would want to know, and again, playing on that mother aspect that she seems to be very proud of. And they start kind of, it could be an accident. We understand it absolutely was an, tell us what the accident was. Because again, you don't want to go in saying you intentionally killed this baby and beat him to death because that's just going to shut down the conversation. You want to build that trust and rapport with the individual to get them to slowly start giving you little details here, little details here, of verbiage that you're going to pick up on as the person on the other side of the table. That, okay, they said this word, now I'm going to go off that word. This was their response. Let's go down this road. And they did an amazing job. I
Me
really
too.
think they did great.
Definitely. I think that she did want to confess, I think it was the lies were not working, and
Hmm.
she didn't have another way of explaining this. So I think like eventually, but I agree, if they came in guns blazing, like, you're a monster, you did this, like, she would have never said anything.
Hmm.
But you get more flies with honey, right? and
Right.
they were kind of appealing to her as a mother, as a person. And I mean, ultimately, I guess she does confess, right? I'm
She
trying to remember
does.
what she actually said
So
about it.
through the conversation, it gradually came out. So we told you the original one. Then it turned into, well, when I put the baby in the pack and play, I put him down roughly and it gently placed him. And then it turned into, I threw him into the bed.
Hmm.
And then it became, well, I threw him into bed and he rolled around and hit his head. And then I replaced him in the middle. Um, and for me, when she said that, that's where the I thought was interesting because that was the one she stuck with is I threw him into the pack and play from a standing position. He rolled and hit his head. When he stopped crying, she very carryingly put him in the middle of the bed, turned his head so he wouldn't be face down, gave him a blanket, and that was her thought process. And you could see in her face where she kind of looked like, yeah, and then I took care of him afterwards, which reiterates that idea of mental health. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that needed to be addressed that were not addressed.
Yeah, definitely a mental health component to this as well.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I mean, it doesn't matter because I don't believe anything that she said about that.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't put a blanket on a 2 month old. Like
Right.
this again
Even
is
if that
like
did
the
happen, not
right. Even if
okay.
he was alive, you don't do that because he could get like he could suffocate. So it's the lack of, and which I think is exactly where we started this episode, is the lack of knowledge and planning for children's safety that is super foreign to me in my world. And it's just like unbelievable. Like that you
Mm-hmm.
think that putting a blanket on a 2 month old makes you sound good, makes you sound like a good babysitter and a good
Right.
mother. And it doesn't it at all. But I don't think that she threw him. What do you think?
Mm. I think she did at one point. I don't think that's where it started because as they go through this conversation, they start introducing, well, he had broken bones. So, okay, I believe that you did that, but what about these other injuries that happened? And that's where I think things happened prior. And I generally do believe after basically she lost her shit and attacked this infant, I 100% believe she walked into the room, tossed him in there, like,
Mm,
oh, I'm done. I don't care. And then that was the end of the incident. I think
gotcha. So
because
like
when
she
you
probably did
have
throw
it,
him, but other
yeah,
things happened as well.
I think things did happen before that. Because when you have interviews like this, typically people do very different things where they're trying to be deceptive. But one thing is they don't typically give specifics. They try to be very vague. And at this point, she was very specific of, I did this. And she like physically demonstrated it. And you're like, oh, I believe that. Versus before she was, I don't know, I want to put him down. Put him down where? In the pack and play. How? Like it was very much them trying to pull out the answers.
Yeah. She was clearly trying to come up with something that sounded like it could explain it, but doesn't make her seem like
Awful.
she intentionally did this.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a momentary lapse of judgment where she chucked the
Mm-hmm.
kid into the playpen. You know how that happens.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Casually toss a 2 month old baby. Like a 2 month old baby is so young. So young.
And they're so little.
And Heather
Like,
really shouldn't even had to have been back at work at that point. Again, I feel like the finances of all of this is like glaringly like you shouldn't
do we
be
know if Heather
back at
was
work.
working?
That's what it says in all the reports. So, I mean, 8 weeks
Because
is 2 months. So I guess, even if you have state, like if you have state, depending on where you are, it's like 6 weeks for a vaginal delivery, 8 weeks for a C-section. So if he was a vaginal delivery and she only had 6 weeks off, like she could have been back at work for 2 weeks. But some places,
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't really, some people don't even feel like they can even take that though, because it's not 100% of your pay.
Right.
And so they go back to work even sooner. And this woman has a 2-month old baby and she's working, she still has to go to the laundromat at night. It's just like a lot. I think
Yeah.
that, I think when resources are scarce, like money and education and a support system of people who can watch your children, it's when
Mm-hmm.
these terrible things happen. And there was like a series of unfortunate circumstances that led Benson to be in this scenario that he should have never been in. Because really, a 2-month old baby should be at home with their mother
Right.
and not at this abusive monster's home, unsupervised with her, where she does God knows what to him for hours and
Mm-hmm.
hours. It's, I don't know.
It's awful.
It's horrible.
So she basically ends up admitting to being the cause of this baby's death.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one thing I thought was interesting at this point, up until previously, she admitted that she didn't try to save the baby at all. And then randomly she just adds in, well, I blew in his mouth. And I was curious what your thoughts were for that.
I don't think she did that. I think
Yeah.
that she was noticing that the cops were absolutely horrified that she didn't do anything to try to help him. So she was picking up on that. And I think that even someone like Marissa wants to be liked and she
Mm-hmm.
wants approval. And she thought that if she said something about how she tried to make it better and she tried to help him, that the cops would not judge her as harshly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think
No,
that's
I
why she was
agree.
saying that. I don't think she
Yeah.
did anything to help him because I think she intentionally killed him. I don't know what she thought was going to happen though, because like they even ask her in the documentary, the police are like, "Well, you didn't think Heather would notice?" Because she
Right.
literally wrapped this baby in a snowsuit and put him in a car seat and handed him to his mother
With a
and said, "Have
hat.
a good night."
Mm-hmm. Pulled his hat down over
Mm-hmm.
his face and eyes so it looks like he was sleeping. I would think, very intentionally.
Definitely. She was like, well, at least she could leave with him. And she also met her at the door and very quickly handed her the baby and didn't let them inside. And she just, I don't know what she thought would happen when they left, but
Mm-hmm.
she just wanted to get some distance, I think,
Yeah.
and some time to
And
run away.
at that point, that is the first time we see Marissa with genuine emotion when the officers say, well, you're going to be charged then.
Mm-hmm.
And your bail
Motion
is
for
going to be
consent.
high. First time we see genuine emotion for her, which kind of shows that lack of remorse of the first time she's upset is when it affects her directly. And she starts to negotiate, well, my bail could be lower. My bail should be lower. I said sorry.
She did.
Which
Eventually.
I work with long, and I've been in this field for a long time. And if I, if we lowered bail or had, we just didn't charge people every time you said sorry, our jails would be empty. Like,
Yeah.
I murdered a baby. I'm sorry. You're right. You did. You understand. Go ahead. Go about your day. No, like,
She had such a selfish, childish worldview and really
yeah,
could not see how this impacted anyone other than her.
yeah,
And she
insane.
is, yeah. I mean, I was reading about what I could find about her past, and it looks like she had a really abusive and terrible childhood with like physical and sexual abuse from her stepfather. And there's a lot of drugs in the home, and both of her parents were openly using in front of her when she was a small child. And that's
Mm-hmm.
all very devastating and upsetting,
Oh,
but
100%.
it in no way justifies anything that happened with Benson or the other kids. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like Marissa is a very sad person, and it's a very sad case of someone being failed their whole life and doing even worse somehow.
Yeah.
Like she had the worst of examples and she somehow turned out even worse than those people.
Yeah, it's really sad, and I think it was kind of inevitable, unfortunately, when you
Yeah, I
look
do
at her
too.
history. it was only a matter of time. If it was her child or someone else's, it was only a matter of time until something devastating happened. But at this point, she was formally charged. She had bail set, which was an extremely high bail, actually.
I think it was 500,000.
500,000 cash bond, which is, don't get me wrong, this case is devastating, but that is ridiculously high, particularly when you're looking at the income, the area, even the charge. A 500,000 cash bond is very, very, very high. Most bonds are not over $100,000.
I wonder why they even gave the option for bond or bail. Because she had been charged for skipping bail multiple times prior to this incident. Like in previous criminal cases that she'd been involved, there's twice that I could find that she jumped bail. So I'm surprised she wasn't just kept on remand. And I think that's probably why the bail was so high.
Oh yeah. It definitely has to do with, you're going to up bail if you jump, you're going to hire one. Typically, from what I've seen, and this is not 100%, you're given bail option first before you're remanded, or unless you are in immediate danger to the community. And reality is, for her life and state, a 500,000 cash bond is remand.
Yeah, it is.
Because anybody in her life liquidating and showing up with $500,000 is not gonna happen. It's just not. So basically, I think their way of doing that and kind of not giving her the option of, you're gonna stay here and then we're gonna have trial.
Yes.
So she had her trial.
I do think she probably would have skipped bail if she could have.
Yeah.
So, probably for the best.
And from what I saw, though, even when she skipped bail, she didn't go anywhere. She just didn't show up to court.
I guess. That's true.
Yeah, she was still around.
She wasn't good at hiding, that's for sure.
No. So she ended up getting 40 years total after she was charged. 3 years for her previous charges of abuse with the other child, and 37 years for the intentional death of Benson.
And I think she was 28 when this incident happened. And I don't know. Do you think someone getting out of jail like in their very late 60s, early 70s, is that justice? Like, should she have ever gotten out? Should she have got less time? Like, what do you think of her sentence?
Well, this is where I think it's interesting, because you have, with the world of sentencing, there's different types of sentencing. You have the ability to do parole and the inability to do parole. And I don't know if you know which she was given, if she had to serve all 40 years or not. But a lot of circumstances, you're sentenced to, example, life in prison, doesn't mean you're spending your life in prison. It means really you're going to spend 25 years or so, you're eligible for parole and can get out. There's things like of good behavior time where you can take time off your sentence. You can also add time depending on your behavior, but I have a hard time when it comes to children and release information. There are certain crimes that I feel like there was no excuse for your behavior. Crimes against children, sexual crimes, they're things that you don't deserve to come back into the world. But then understanding the criminal justice system, housing a prisoner is not cheap. And the older you get, the more expensive a person is. So most systems don't want an elderly population in their prison because they're responsible if they get sick, if they need care, if they need all of these things. They get put in special housing so they're not taken advantage of by younger inmates. Like, they're not, the older you are, the more expensive you are from a business perspective. And our facilities are so overcrowded already, which is a whole different issue.
Whole different issue,
um,
but yeah.
you kind of want the option of, and the whole point is to rehabilitate them into
Right.
communities so they can go back.
So I
Which
did
is,
find that she was ordered to do the 2 sentences consecutively.
mm-hmm,
Um, and then she's going to be on extended supervision for 20 years afterwards.
mm-hmm.
So, and she, was given credit for time served. So she was in jail from, yeah, so I guess when she's 68, she'll be getting out of prison, and then another 20 years after that, she'll be supervised. So hopefully by the time she's 88, she'll be too old and frail to kill anybody.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
And it's, and supervision again is a whole nother issue and conversation, of an overworked population where there's not enough time in the day to deal with all the people under your supervision. So it'll be interesting as it comes out, because it, she does decide to go back into this world. It's, I'm the sweet old lady. Look at my grown children. I would be happy to watch your
Mm,
baby. Like, I
oh
could
my
see it. I could
God.
see it
That's
happening.
so scary.
Like, how
Oh,
many
that's so
older people
true.
do you see going up to babies? Oh my God, they're so cute. And you just go, oh, look at this sweet little lady telling my baby that they're like, you don't think that they're dangerous. So it's possible.
Well, I think that is a mouthful, but it's also it's part of the problem with this is that we are just it's like we want to trust mothers, we want to trust
Mm-hmm.
women,
Mm-hmm.
and this she's a very good example of someone who cannot be trusted, should not be trusted, that was given many, 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 many more opportunities. And we don't even have the details of the opportunities that she was given through CPS.
Right.
But I'm sure that, I mean, I don't know the circumstances of those children being removed, but from my understanding of how CPS works, their goal is to reunite children with their biological families. And if
Yes.
that had been an option, then she probably would have still been working towards that. But to have all of your parental rights terminated is pretty extreme. So there is probably
Mm-hmm.
a lot of incidents that we just don't even have records of.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
fact that she was not, I mean, it's just, it's so sad. I mean, a
It
person
is.
like this just should have had no contact with children at all.
Yeah. And
And
I think the one thing that the documentary we watched gave her a lot more credit than I think she deserved, where I don't think she was a criminal mastermind. I don't think she had all of these strategies talking to police or her activities, or I think it was all very short sighted in her behaviors and
mm,
selfish and what's going to happen to me. And it's very easy to look back during interviews of, oh, look at this that she did, or this way she worded it, or her behavior here. And in
yeah,
law
I mean,
enforcement, the reason, I hate to say it, but like, criminals are stupid. The reason they get caught is because they're not the brightest people. Majority of crime doesn't get caught. It's just reality. And
yeah,
listening to her, I don't feel like she, a lot of the things they're like, okay, here's her verbiage here, and this is why she did it. I genuinely don't think she thought anything through during the conversations with police other than, I need to not let them know what happened. I need to protect myself. I could get in trouble. It was very selfish. I don't think she was trying to be deceptive. I don't think she was trying to do anything. I think she just was scared of going to jail.
selfish and short-sighted,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, because there is no motive
Right.
to do this. Like she doesn't get any benefit out of doing it other than I guess some sick desire that she wants to or some sort of thrill from it, which she doesn't say but could be the only, like there's nothing, she's not going to profit from this in any way. There's no benefit to her life to killing this
Mm-hmm.
baby that she doesn't even have to watch beyond today if she doesn't want to. Like she's not
Yeah.
trapped in a situation, she's put herself there voluntarily
Mm-hmm.
and did this intentionally for seemingly no reason at all.
And you gotta wonder also is that idea of maybe she didn't do it intentionally. Maybe it was reactive, which is not,
Mhm.
it doesn't make an excuse, but maybe she, each time the baby's crying and fussing and they can't communicate. They cry. And maybe she's just like, oh my God, I can't handle it, regardless of how long it is. Oh my God, can't handle it. And just freaks out and then goes into panic mode and reactive. Oh crap, what did I do? Gotta protect myself. And
That is what,
again, that's the mental
yeah.
health of you. You don't know what's inside her head either.
It's just like I feel like with those situations, it's usually brought on by someone who's like chronically not sleeping, and then as this is going on for weeks and weeks, they just like snap and shake a baby, which, but like also maybe I'm also trying to justify it because I think
Mm-hmm.
that if Adam had done this, um, I would be like, well, duh, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
you know, not
yeah,
surprised, like I don't think I would be trying to justify it in any way. I think
yeah.
that she just was stupid and a manipulative monster that wasn't very good at like executing her plans. For
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason she did this. There's nothing that would justify it. She got no benefit from it,
Yeah.
but it was a clear pattern of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't know if she intended to do that day. I don't think it was that far thought out, but
Yeah.
it at least
I think it just
shows.
happened, and she was like, "Well, it happened." Very nonchalant.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I can't believe this keeps happening.
Right. They're out to get me. Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I was trying to find the article, but I can't find it, where it says that she has many prison boyfriends, like
Oh,
men that
which
she's
is
writing to
so
on the
popular
outside.
though. People
Yeah.
think that's a rare thing. Oh my, all of them do.
I mean, imagine going to prison and not at least trying to get pen pals to cover your commissary. Like, I would.
Listen, commissary, what people don't also understand is commissary is not cheap.
Oh,
You think
yeah, it's very
going to
overpriced.
like the regular store is expensive? Commissary is probably 3 times that. And the majority of people don't have money to put on their own books or because you can't just deposit your own money. People from the community need to do that.
That's true.
So you need family, friends, significant others, children, whatever the relationship is. You need them to go to the prison, be like, hey, I want to put X amount on so and so's books. And then they do it. And there's a fee for that. So it's not cheap for the person on the outside either. So it's super common. There's tons of webs. There's a TV show about it of my, what is it, My Prison Wife or something like that.
I mean, I've watched Prison Wives, if that's what you're talking about, one of my favorite documentary series ever.
No, there's like
Um,
a TV show where like people get released from prison and they go, quote, start a relationship with their pen pal, being like,
oh,
I
like
love
Love
them.
After Lockup.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Also a great show. Great
um,
show.
but yeah, I think she had multiple pen pals while maintaining her relationship with Adam.
Hmm.
And they were like, this shows her manipulation. I don't think that shows her manipulation. I think that's survival instinct.
She
And
also got nothing else to do.
right, you have nothing else to do. That's entertainment to them. And
Mhm.
this is where I'm like, listen, if you're stupid enough to write a prisoner that you've never met and then give them money, that's on you. That's not on her. It's on you.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't
I
care
mean, it's
about you. She
really,
doesn't know you. Like,
it
she's using
shows
you.
her entrepreneurial spirit
Yes.
and her, she's gonna get her bills covered, clearly. So
Yeah.
good for her. Get those commissary Twinkies. Like it's the only joy she'll have in this life.
Listen, one
So
episode we should probably talk about one day is like the creativeness in prisons and women's prisons specifically, because they come up with some pretty cool and interesting stuff from commissary and taking regular things. Maybe we'll do an episode on that because it's
I
interesting
would
compared to
I
the
would love
men.
that. You know what I'm obsessed with is prison makeup, when they take like
Yes.
coffee and turn it into like I love it. So I would
Yeah.
love to talk about that. Prison wine. I would love to make prison wine, see how it
Hooch.
goes. Use my toilet.
Oh my god, it smells really bad.
Oh, I
It
bet.
smells awful.
I bet.
But yeah, no, we'll talk about that one day. But yeah, I think it's just such an unfortunate circumstance, kind of just circling back to Benson. And the poor
Hmm.
thing, I feel bad for the family. I feel bad for the sibling who definitely, like 3-year-old, witnessed some of it. And there's nothing
Oh
really
yeah.
said about any of it, but he saw some stuff. And I
Hmm.
feel bad. But at the same time, I feel bad for the 3-year-old. I struggle with Heather because I feel bad she lost her baby. No one deserves that. But I don't feel like she should be left off 100% scot-free, where I still genuinely believe she knew about that circumstance. She knew about the one in August, and she still chose to put her baby there. And I have a
Well,
hard time with
we have proof that at least that day
that. Right.
she
At least that
100%
day.
knew, and there was a delay. And I think that Benson's safety was not a high priority
Mhm.
for anybody in
Yeah.
this, and that's really, really sad.
Yeah.
A 2-month-old baby should be handled like a Fabergé egg. Like it should be, there should be no mistreatment of it. It's not even, he can't misbehave.
Right. He
He's
cries.
2 months
And I
old.
think
He's
that's
gonna
what triggered
cry.
it. It was the
But it's a
crying.
reasonable expectation that a 2-month-old baby is going to cry. It's, you
Hmm.
cannot be surprised by that
Right.
and react violently to it. It doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
especially
It's
when you
just
are a
devastating.
professional babysitter.
Right.
This is your
Oh,
job.
people.
I mean, definitely needed, she needed to get fired for sure.
Hmm. All right. What's your last take on this before we part for this mom?
I think I'm gonna try to get a prison boyfriend to send me
Oh,
money. Well,
there you
I guess
go.
I'll pretend to be a prisoner and get somebody to
Mm.
send me money
I
because
mean,
I
you
don't
could
want to
write a
hang out.
prisoner and see,
No, but
like,
they don't have money.
that's true. They do tell you
I
how pretty you are, which is, always a nice thing.
okay, okay. I mean, I don't really want to hang out, so that's kind of perfect. I don't know what my husband will think, but what he doesn't know can't hurt him, right? That's what
We
I
can
always
get him
say.
a prison girl. She could write letters to
He's
him and
not
say how
sending
nice he
anybody.
is.
He's not sending anybody money, though. That's the thing.
No, he can send me money.
I know. Honestly, I would. He could send you. That would be better, I
A
think, but
plane
still not
ticket.
great.
Yeah. Be like,
Plane
he
ticket to
got me
come
my plane
here would be
ticket.
good.
Come visit.
That
There we
sounds
go.
good. Yeah. All right. I'll let him know. Put it on your books. All right.
Oh,
How
perfect.
about
I'm
you?
ready.
Final thought other than Marissa sucks?
Marissa sucks. Heather had some negligence.
Mm,
The poor baby
mm,
and the poor brother. I
yeah.
I would
And
be
those other
worried
kids
about.
that she hurt.
Oh, and all the other kids. But
Ugh,
I cannot imagine what that poor kid is going to grow up.
I know.
That's not something that you just forget. Like, and I know 3 is young, but
But those might
trauma
be
like
some of his
that,
first memories.
right? And that
That's
makes me
so
sad.
horrible. Yeah.
And on that
Well,
super depressing note,
yeah. Well, on that depressing note, thank you for taking the time to chit chat today. I
yeah,
enjoyed, even though it was very dark. Um, but that's kind of what we do here on Mothers of All Crime.
yes. And I think this was just an example that not everyone should be a mother.
Right. And that being a mother doesn't actually qualify you to
To
do
be a
anything.
safe person. Yeah,
Right.
100%.
Yeah. We yeah. Don't make assumptions, basically.
Yes. All right.
All right.
Well, it was good to talk to you and
You too.
happy new year.
You too. I'm sure we'll talk next year very soon.
Oh, yes. All
All
right.
right.
I'll talk to you
Have
soon.
a good one. Bye.